This is The Meaningful Way. I'm your host, Luke Iorio. Today, everyone, I want to connect to a theme that seems to be recurring on these shows, and that's this idea of how do we disconnect so that we can connect. You know, with all of the busyness that's out there, how is it that we find a way to stay connected to ourselves and not lose sight of what enables us to be at our best in the world? And so let's disconnect today with a slightly unlikely evangelist for this topic. Because when you think about disconnection, you probably don't think about Google. So our guest today is Gopi Kallayil, the Chief Evangelist in brand marketing at Google. He works with Google sales teams and customers and helps them grow customer brands through digital marketing. In his prior roles at Google, he led the marketing team for the company's flagship advertising product AdWords, both in America and Asia Pacific. He's an avid yoga practitioner, triathlete, global traveler, Burning Man devotee, and he's been a speaker for TEDx, Wisdom 2.0, the Renaissance Weekend, World Happiness Summit, and the World Peace Festival. He's also a host of a TV program on cable and YouTube called The Changemakers. And today we're going to focus on his recent book, The Internet to the Internet, 5 Ways to Reset Your Connection and Live a Conscious Life, recently published by Hay House. And so, Gopi, I want to thank you so much for coming on to The Meaningful Way.
Thank you, Luke. My pleasure and honor to be here.
You know, as I was getting to know a bit about your background, I guess maybe the starting point that I had of kind of incredible curiosity about your journey, because as you describe it, you come from a family of rice farmers in rural India to become the chief evangelist for Google. How does that happen? How does one go from that type of distance to the types of things that you're involved in today?
Yeah, Luke, so I don't know if I can give you a magic formula on and you do these things. This is how the transition takes place. I just marvel at the social mobility and transformation that has taken place in just 2 generations. Yeah, it is true. My grandparents were rice farmers, cultivating a very small plot of land in a village called Chittalangeri in Kerala in southern India. And my father was one of the people typical in third world villages to leave the village to go in search of a job. And a man who never went to college, neither of my parents did, and found a job as a factory worker. And they start building the life from that point onwards. And then when they had us kids, a similar kind of aspiration like parents anywhere in the world have, that the next generation will experience a better life and have more social mobility. And we did. We went on, the 4 kids between us, we went on to get 10 college degrees, including 2 from US Ivy League business schools, even though my parents at that time had never set foot in America. And several things, years later, here I am at Google, playing this role of chief evangelist brand marketing, talking to our 1,000 largest clients. So the arc of that story, if you would ask, so how did that happen? Yeah. I couldn't give you a very well-defined formula, but I can point to 2 or 3 things. And the 2 or 3 things were, one, definitely a sense of venturing out, a sense of adventure, and willing to step into domains, environments, experiences that no one else in my family or circle may have known about. So the kind of schools that I went to, or leaving India to go work in other parts of the world, or switching industries or careers, all of those things. The second is when doors open, walking through it. So it's simply a question of saying yes to life. Here and there, we all have opportunities presented to us. And I said yes to many, many things along the way. Even if I didn't quite know what was inside the room, I would walk in through the door. And that has helped a lot. And third, I would say, Luke, there is definitely some combination of luck, mentors, grace, other people, sometimes complete strangers who've guided, willing to help, support. And you pick fragments of information, skills from all of them, and each one moves you forward a little bit more. So in that sense, I would say that wasn't one big giant leap, but it was really 1,000 small steps in manageable chunks over a long period of time, when added up, has led to this arc, which now includes not just the job, but say a book or speaking at TEDx or a music album, and a really fulfilling and energized life.
I think one of the qualities that you just described, even though you didn't use the word, was sort of this openness that you've got to life. And even the adventure, walking through the door, saying yes, the luck, the mentors that have come along. It sounds like within maybe your personality, or certainly maybe the philosophy you've developed, there's this openness to see what unfolds in front of you. And it sounds like that it's with that openness and then that willingness to adventure as things get revealed to you that has proven to be a very important part of the journey that you just walked us through.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, according as you go through this journey, and I know because I've seen you speak, and I've seen, read the book and seen many different things, and you talk a lot about the extraordinary accessibility of information in today's age, and yet at the same time, the challenges that now brings to us. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, because information accessibility is what creates a certain degree of that social mobility for so many different people in different parts of the world. And at the same time, there's a different element, different set of challenges that now come with that because of the pervasiveness of everything that's quite literally at our fingertips.
Yeah, it is pretty astounding. And all of this has happened over the last 8 to 10 years or less. Mm-hmm. That we can now carry a little device the size of the deck of a playing card, and it can do amazing things. For one, it seems to have access to every single piece of publicly available human knowledge, information, and wisdom. And it seems to have this amazing ability to understand you and deal with things almost in a human-like fashion, sometimes even with more superiority. For example, I am holding one of my phones in my hand, and I'll just do this quick demo, even though you can't see it. You'll hear it. Let me try this. Okay, Google, what is Picasso's full name?
Pablo Picasso's full name is Pablo Diego Jose Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno Maria de los Remedios Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Ruiz y Picasso.
Yeah, you heard that?
Yes, we did.
I would not have. Nobody in the world would have been able to tell me all 20 names of Picasso in the past, unless you are like a person who studies and researches and has gone deep into his background. And yet this little device we all carry in our pockets is perfectly, effortlessly able to do it with the correct Spanish accent, etc. So that is the level of capability that is accessible to all human beings around the world who are connected to some sort of a device and to the internet. And currently it's about an estimated 2.4 billion people, and for free, for just getting that information itself. And the same thing, I can go watch one of your talks if it's on YouTube for free, and if it's a TEDx talk, and it might have been delivered in English, but the click of a button, it's translated into Finnish or Gujarati at my own choosing. I was walking around Japan a few months ago and in Sao Paulo a couple of months before that. And in both cases, I don't speak Japanese, I don't speak Portuguese, but this little device, the size of a deck of playing cards, is all I needed to be able to communicate with people on the street or in the hotel. It is pretty astounding what we human beings now are capable of accessing. And it's all happened in a very short time. And to me, what's also delightful, Luke, is it is not because of one person, company, institution. It is a collective of millions of people that has made it possible. And to some extent, we got to recognize, honor, and thank the person who designed the browser and the person who works on the security systems that makes it all, ties it together, and the person who uploads a cat video to on YouTube. They all have a certain openness and certain contribution, and somehow as a group we have agreed that we will make all of this available for the vast majority of the part, easily accessible and for free when we put out this kind of content or these kind of technologies. At the same time, it also has put in front of us as human beings a volume of information that we might not have been trained to use, handle, digest. And we're overwhelmed by all of that. And on top of it, new forms of communication or data points that come towards us that we didn't have to deal with before. So I mentioned my grandparents, and they would get a letter in the mail once in 3-4 weeks. And the postman didn't even have to stop every day. And that's about the only piece of communication from outside the community that they had. For you and I, it is 350 every single day. Probably half a day it comes through, whether it's social media or email. Each one of them begging for a little bit of our attention and asking us to respond and react and consume in some way. So it is forcing us to ask ourselves, what is our relationship with all of this information, with all of these technologies, and having to establish a certain set of new norms that we didn't have to deal with before.
It truly is amazing with the volume of what's out there. We've got this constant competition for our attention, and it's pulling it in every which direction. And I think that word relationship with technology, I know, is something that you dive into quite a bit within the book. And I want to get to that framework, but just after this kind of one question of, I'm curious at, with what you've been exposed to, obviously through the work that you're now doing with Google, as well as the journey that you've been on, what were the seeds? What was it that ultimately planted the idea in your mind for this book? What was it that finally had you say, you know what, now's the time for it, and this is something that I care deeply about and want to put out into the world?
I was sitting having lunch one day. I was invited to have lunch with a visitor to Google, Luke. His name is Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev. He's a teacher from India. And over lunch, he had spoken at Davos, I believe, and one of the Google execs was impressed with the social work he's doing and invited him to Google. So I was sitting at the lunch when he espoused this philosophy that I was quite struck by, and the point he made. And he teaches a concept called inner engineering, and he was explaining why he called it engineering. And his whole idea is that if he teaches a set of techniques to people so that they can work from within, inside out, on the body, their mind, the brain, their thinking, etc. He's got a methodology or a toolkit. And what struck me was the metaphor he was using, and he said, everything we experience in our life has to go through this technology. And when he mentioned this technology, he gestured towards his body. And he said, if we eat a piece of food, that is being digested by this technology. If we listen to your podcast, and if I'm trying to understand it, it has to be processed by this technology, meaning the sound has to go through my ears and follow and then create certain impressions. And if we enjoy a piece of music, two different people can enjoy it very differently, depending on how their inner technologies receive and respond to that music. And so that point kind of stayed with me for a while. And even though very simple, I found it extremely elegant and sophisticated. And I started thinking some more about it. It also struck me, Luke, that all of our self-expression in life is also coming out of this technology. What I mean by that is whether we make a delicious meal or write the next brilliant piece of software, whether we create an amazing piece of music, or whether we go out and dance or play some sport, all of that is an expression of our body, our mind, our ideas, what we do with our hands, etc. So that led me to a very simple conclusion that the quality of my life is the quality of this inner technology. And if I put my inner technologies, which is my body, my mind, my spirit, and for some people would also then add brain for sure, and then some people may add my consciousness. If all of that is operating in a state of peak performance, then the quality of my life is higher and the quality of my self-expression, my output is also much better. So therefore, I need to focus on what is it that I can do. And that, suddenly it struck me, has become a modern day challenge, much more so than before, because of all of these technologies, information coming to us, which is putting us in a very paradoxical situation that our inner technologies, and you understand as well, you talk about this a lot in your coaching to your clients and the writings and speeches, our inner technologies need their moments of quiet and withdrawal. All of these outer technologies, while extremely useful, fragment our attention, as you correctly said. So that is the dichotomy that I wanted to address, and which I wrote about in this book and gave it as a talk for the first time at a TEDx.
It is why I wanted to ask you the background, because I do agree and think that the timeliness of this topic it's what's needed right now, because we are pulled and our attention is pulled in so many different directions, and yet the most important relationship that we have is with that inner technology. I love the simplicity of that quality of life is directly determined by the quality of that inner technology, the mind, the body, the spirit, the consciousness that we talk about, and certainly comes up tremendously on this show. So one of the ways that you talk about how we kind of build this relationship and the way in which we work with the inner world and still operating it in the midst of operating is really some of the 5 strategies, the 5 ways that you put forward in your book. And you described them quite interestingly. You called them rituals. So it wasn't just that they were strategies. It wasn't just practices. I'm guessing you very intentionally used that word rituals. And I'm curious why that word? Why that? What was the intention behind that?
So I started experimenting with myself, and this book is really a collection of it's a report on those experiments with my own life as I tried to adapt it. So the good news was the solution to address it I found already exists, meaning the great wisdom traditions coming from different parts of the world, different cultures. Human beings before us, Luke, have gone and figured out lots of things about what makes their body and mind work at a peak of performance, whether it's nutrition or exercise or meditation or yoga or breathing techniques or walking in nature or a relationship with music, all of those things. There is somebody who's figured some incredible set of next steps. So the operating manual is available for all of us, and it's in public domain and it's free. We just need to apply it. The challenge was that the operating manual is easier to apply in practice if you live far away in a remote rural place or in a monastery or something where the rhythm of life allowed you to go through it. But as soon as you jump into a much more frenzied, fast-paced modern life surrounded by all of this technology, say in the middle of Manhattan or San Francisco, it seems harder to follow that operating manual. I found that in my own life, in the wisdom traditions I was brought up in, whether it's yoga, meditation, and some of the other spiritual practices and cultural traditions I was raised in India, a lot of things were ritualized. And when it's ritual, you practice on a regular and consistent basis because there is a daily or a weekly ritual built around it. And that made it easy. I remember the time when I was at the ashram in India studying to be a yoga teacher, and every single day I was there. Get up at 5:30 in the morning, the bell goes off. At 6, you sit for meditation. Everybody in the ashram, that is a ritual. And 6 to 6:30, half an hour you meditate. At 6:30, then you start singing in this tradition called kirtan, which is nice and sweet and very accessible. At 8 o'clock, you do 2 hours of pranayama and yoga. So it was ritualized, and I found it easy to follow the rhythm and routine. And I started trying similar kind of approaches in my own life here. And I found that 2 things actually help. One is ritualizing, and second is making it a tiny daily or a weekly habit where it's not too daunting. But it's still like a habit and a practice. And then I had the best chance of building it into my life in a way that I could do it regularly and consistently. Excellent. And that's why the power of ritual, at least for me personally, seemed to be the best way to go towards it.
It's something else that just kind of jumped out at me with the way that you described that. And one of the phrases you used is that rhythm of life, and how if we're removed from maybe some of the busier sides of society, that rhythm of life permits this a little more easily. But the rhythm of life in the typical busy society that most of us are in, certainly the listeners of this podcast, it's tougher to do so. But it's interesting to think of those rituals as those rhythm setters. Because of the daily, weekly way in which we do it, we are setting ourselves specifically into the rhythm of life that we want to be able to carry forward, that we want to beat our drum to, as it were, which I think is a really interesting perspective on how to look at some of this. So I wanted to chat a little bit about some of these rituals, and I think the one more than any, just because of the focus of this show and the audience that I know listens in each week. The first of the lessons that you teach is around focus on the essential. And I guess the two big questions that I have for you around this is, first, how do you go about identifying what is truly essential? Because I could see so many of us creating these kind of long lists, which then defeats the purpose of really focusing on just what's essential. And then once you do, how do you ingrain it so that you can say no to the distractions?
Yeah. So two things. First of all, I arrived at this concept or my own essentials while reflecting on the philosophy and quote by German philosopher Wolfgang Goethe, who said, "Things that are more important should not be at the mercy of things that are less important." And I first heard it when I was listening to a set of Stephen Covey tapes. And it, again, was a quote that had a deep impression on me and struck with me. Things that are more important should not be at the mercy of things that are less important. And that I realized innately, instinctively, that what he's trying to express through that is, if you have a set of essentials, if you know what is truly important and most important in your life, then make sure that those get prioritized all the time, and everything else is a distraction, and you should try and push them away. But there was actually a seminal event that made it even more concrete in my life. I was running a startup company after I'd left McKinsey here in the Palo Alto, Silicon Valley area. I was building a startup company with another McKinsey alum. And being you are an entrepreneur, you know this. It can be very demanding, very stressful, and it takes a lot of energy. And to get a bit of respite during that time, one of those weekends when I was engaged with the startup, I took off and went to a monastery in the Big Sur coast called the New Camel Dolly Hermitage. And this monastery is set up for people to go and stay there for a short while and have a private retreat in a solitary cottage overlooking the ocean. The monks provide you food, and you bring it back to your room and eat. So you're not even sitting in community and having lunch or dinner. The whole idea is spend the time in contemplation and reflection. So I spent the weekend doing this, and it struck me, Luke, while I was there, that the startup company I was working on had a business plan. I didn't seem to have a business plan for my life. I was just lurching from one thing that called for my attention to another without any arc or a plan. So I decided then and there to resolve it and change it, and I wrote down the business plan for my life. And I called it more cleverly the organizing principles of my life. And I had one simple rule, and that was, while the company business plan was several hundred pages, I said my life need not be that complicated. I should be able to get it down to just one page, one sheet of paper. And that's what I did. I wrote it down to fit onto one sheet of paper. And then I was not satisfied with that. I said, it should be simple enough that I should be able to carry it on my fingertips. And I spent the next several hours trying to do it. And I distilled it into 5 words so that I could carry it literally on my fingertips, those 5 words. And that is what really have been since then. Now it's about 14 years or so, help me establish what my essentials, what my priorities are. So how do you then make sure you put into practice? I do 2 things. First of all, I actually do 3. I try to block out time on my calendar for those essentials. So an example, health, fitness, physical activity is high priority for me. So yesterday was Monday, every Monday, 5:30, I teach and lead the yoga class at Google for the Yoglers. Today, Tuesday, I was not able to go to my morning high-intensity interval training class, but because it's a priority, I move things around, and shortly after this interview, I am going to go do that before I get on with the rest of the day. So you kind of calendar it. The second thing that I do is there are constantly demands that come out. People invite you to events. There are a million things going on. And when those things come, there is a tiny moment when you say yes to that or no to that particular thing that calls for attention, where some of your energy or time has to be allocated. It can be a social event. It can be a meeting, a book you have to read. So whenever these things come up and I'm at that fork, I look at it and say, does this fit into my 5 essentials? If it does not, I try to say no most of the time, unless there are a few things where due to certain obligations or other reasons I have to say yes. And I make sure that those I keep to less than 15-20%. I call them the tax I have to pay for an otherwise fantastic life. And there's always a little tax you'll have to pay. There are meetings you get pulled into at work or events you'll have to go to, even though you really don't want to, or say yes to certain engagements. The third.
I'm sorry. There was just so much wonderful stuff in there, and just because I'd love for you to then expand on this, is just that the idea of creating that life plan. I love the defining it of organizing principles for your life. As you boil it down to those 3 to 5 essentials for each of us, the decision tool that it becomes, and what for the listeners, what Gopi's done is actually started to incorporate several of the other rituals of doing one thing at a time, 1 minute of connection, and how do you build those appointments into your calendar for yourself to ritualize this. And I absolutely love the way that so much of this works together. The one other strategy I was hoping to have you expand on, and this might be where you were going, is this idea of friending yourself. Because I think there was a slightly different twist that most people may not put as much focus on as we probably need to make the rest of this happen.
Absolutely, yeah. So let me speak about that concept here, Luke.
Yeah.
So today, living in the age of social media, we're all proud of how many social connections we have and nurture, and it's become a badge of honor to say, more than 1,000 people follow me on or connect or follow me on Twitter, or I have 600 connections on LinkedIn, and my social network on Facebook is 1,000 people large, which is all well and good. I mean, it's given us the power and scale to take chunks of our life and our things we want to say and put it out in front of a large number of people with whom we may have weak or strong connections. No doubt about that. But in the midst of it all, the most important relationship we will ever have, like you said in the beginning, is the one with ourselves. The most important relationship you will have is the one with yourself. And whether we like our hair color or body type or a smile or a voice, you are going to be with that friend for the rest of your life. You're not going to be able to do that. So might as well befriend and become their best friend, because look.
It's so important.
Exactly. So the idea here is, again, drawing a metaphor from social media, I said, let's pause short enough or long enough each day to listen to the tweet from our heartbeat, or listen to the status update from our body, or the chat request from our brain, because there are important messages and signals that are coming from there. Everything from that you need to sleep a little bit more, or that you're hungry, or you need to move your body, to that you're emotionally distraught, or you need some love, or there is pain in some part of your body, it needs an expert attention. All those are messages that keep coming. And we're moving so quickly and we're inundated with all this information. We sometimes don't even notice it, or we notice it, but we ignore it. We brush it aside, not giving it the attention, when, again, listening to your heartbeat may be more important than reading the next feed that comes through your social media.
What just popped up for me is the way in which, again, you describe this, is that when we think about those friends that we really, really, really care about, and we can see that there's part of what they're going through that they're not connecting to deeper within themselves. It's a block they have, a struggle, something they're not quite getting through. And yet they try to brush it aside and they try to get on with their life. We see how much they're struggling, and we want to help them, and we want to step in. And how is it that we can, give them that love, or give them that appreciation, or that acknowledgement, or acceptance, whatever it is that they need at that time? We would do it for our closest friends. And all you're reminding us to do is we need to do it for ourselves as well.
Exactly.
So just as we begin to wind up, I guess there was just 2 questions, because I want to get to our final question, but there was one other that was here, because you mentioned yoga, and I know how important yoga as a practice and yoga to your Google family is so important. And one of the things I've heard you speak about was how yoga is actually helping people at Google live a more conscious life. And I was wondering if you could just speak to that for a moment or two before we wrap up today. How
Absolutely.
are you doing that?
Well, a lot of Googlers practice yoga or within Google itself, meaning in one of the sessions, classes that are offered. And by yoga, I'm particularly referring to the physical part of the vast yoga philosophy, the asana practice, the postures. So At Google, we have 300 classes a week somewhere in the Google system. We might be the largest number of yoga classes. And this I'm talking about worldwide, not just the Google headquarters in Mountain View. And in fact, with a group of Googlers for a while, I've been working on this project in my 20% time, my 20% project, which is to make sure that there is at least one yoga class a week in every Google office above a certain size. So that could be New York or in New Delhi or in London or in San Francisco. And we are up to about 300 now, which is fantastic. A lot of them are taught by Googlers to other Googlers. We have a program where if you have a skill or talent, you can bring it to work. So the classes themselves could be led by Google employees, which is fantastic. So every week, thousands of Googlers pause their work and go into one of the classes, which take place sometimes at 7 in the morning, or it could be at noon, or it could be at 4 in the afternoon. So it works in your schedule. We also do retreats where groups of Googlers go away. I just was at one at the Shivananda Ashram in Bahamas, where 16 Googlers from all over the world travel with me and join me there for a weekend of yoga, meditation, and a workshop on bringing mindful awareness to work. So a lot of elements like that are available as part of your work day and your life here that allows Googlers to really actively practice it and make it part of their life. We simplify it and make it easy for them.
I love the way that it's prioritized, that you're helping your team members to be able to connect to that internet, that inner world, and it's built into the way that we work, because I think it's something that is becoming a bigger part of the conversation today, but it's a part of the conversation that's been missing for a long time. I guess maybe just to bring this full circle, we've chatted about quite a bit, but one of the bigger things I did want to get into, which you did, was focusing in on that essential. And so if I tie things back, the name of the show is The Meaningful Way, and I'm sure this might tie back to what is the essential for you with this question. But Gopi, for you, what is it that gives you meaning in your life and in your work?
Well, look, I define myself as the happy human. That's what my card says. And there are three values that I try to put above all, and that is joy, living a life of joy, freedom, and peace of mind. So for me, what is most meaningful and highest is most essential is to make sure that those things are always present, that I'm making choices with my time, my energy, my work, my life, my friends, etc., that optimize on those. And through that, what I'm really trying to do is I feel that we all have certain talents, gifts, and purpose. And our most important goal in life is to live our highest life, live our highest purpose. However we define it, what is meaningful, what is most purposeful for us. And our life is one giant nonstop experiment to try different things and get to that point. And there is no end state. You can only be at a higher state than you were last week or last month. So you're constantly trying to get to that point where you feel that I am living my highest self ever. And secondly, you can't do it alone. You help others get there as well and take help from others to get there as well. And I think of that as the primary pillars and purpose of my life, something that gives me most meaning.
Gopi, I want to thank you for coming here to The Meaningful Way, sharing a bit of yourself, and certainly sharing a bit about your book with this whole community. Thanks again.
Thank you, Luke. Such a delight and pleasure talking to you on the show.
For everyone, number one, obviously, I want to encourage you to check out The Internet to the Internet, 5 Ways to Reset Your Connection and Live a Conscious Life. Very much want to encourage you to check out that book and go a lot deeper into some of the concepts that Gopi and I got into today. But I guess if I was going to leave you with one thing that really stands out, it is just that concept of living our highest life. Because when we consider the meaningful way, isn't that what we're after? That continual evolution process, the continual learning, the different experimenting that we can do, because we're perpetually living into our highest life. It is part of the journey. It is not a destination. And so, as always, I want to continue to encourage you on that journey, and I hope you will enjoy the ride. Talk to you again next week. thanks for tuning in to The Meaningful Way. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor and please subscribe and follow along with all these great guests, their stories, and interviews. Also, it helps us a lot if you not only share some of your favorite episodes online, but also provide us feedback. Go into iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your favorite podcast app happens to be, and rate the show. Provide us some feedback and let us know how it is that we're doing. If you want to learn more about what we're up to, whether it be with the iPet Coach Training School, the Live, Lead, Play Network, or even just what's evolving with The Meaningful Way, go on and head on over to lukeiorio.com.